Do you romanticize old grey concrete apartment blocks, cramped flats and public transport? Do you miss the times where people were normal and the shelves in the shops were almost completely empty?
No? Me neither. But I do like this dress from the 80s sewing book I own. Actually, it is the first dress I have ever made. The thing is that it's not really wearable. People that follow me for some time already may have seen this dress on my Instagram or in the What I Made in 2020 video. It is in fact the first article of clothing I have made entirely myself. But why is this dress unwearable, you may ask? Well, the reason for that is that the fabric it's made from is not really made for clothing. I only started sewing about a year ago, and when I did, my mom didn't really trust me with good fabric, understandably so. So the only things I could use were some materials that were left after my paternal grandmother. Because of that, this dress was supposed to be just a mock-up, and the only reason why it's not looking like one is the fact that I was lucky to find fabrics in matching colors. Sadly, those fabrics are not made for clothing, and wearing this dress is just a torture. I do really like the cut of it though, so I decided to remake it as a way of celebrating my 1 year sewing anniversary. This time actually I will be making it from wearable fabrics. So let's move on to the actual sewing of this dress. Luckily, because I have already made this dress, I had the pattern already drafted out and I know that it will fit me. That's the good thing about mock-ups, I guess. I used two fabrics to mimic the original dress. One dark green and one white, green and navy blue checkered fabric. I started out by sewing the darts and assembling the bodice together. Now, I decided to look at how I made this first dress, and for some reason I cut the darts and finished them like normal seams. Clearly, I didn't know what I was doing. Also, just a heads up, there's a lot of machine sewing shots in this video and there are only so many angles I can film this from. Next, I quickly assembled the skirt. Nothing complicated, just a few long seams. I gathered the top of the skirt to match the bottom of the bodice. Wow, it is very fast compared to the hand sewing I did on my corset cover. Haha, shameless video plug, check it out. At this point, I realized that before joining the dress together, I need to finish all the seams. I decided to just do a quick zigzag stitch by machine. Fast and basic doesn't mean bad. Zigzag everything if you want, who cares? It's fast, effective and time efficient, and let's be honest, which teenager in the 80s had time to do fancy finishing that no one will even see? I quickly sewed the skirt and bodice together. Because I'm terrible at sewing anything gathered by machine, I had to resew some parts, but I didn't film it since everything seems to come out wrong when it's being filmed. Trust me. After I marveled at how quickly this project is coming together, I moved on to the sleeves. Well, actually no. I first had to wait for a small power outage, really fitting for our 80s in Poland project. You know, controlling and threatening the people by the government and stuff. Nothing special for those times. sleeves of this dress are huge. They are gathered at the top, and on the bottom they have a channel with an elastic tape that also acts as gathering. The elastic is used to make the dress easier to put on since you don't have to worry about ripping anything or it not fitting your arm anymore. I first sewed the gathering thread to the top, but I didn't gather it yet. Next, I sewed the inner sleeve seam. When this was done, I sewed the fabric channel to the bottom of the sleeve, trying to match the patterns of both pieces together. I put the elastic in the channel and sewed the ends together. Then I fiddled with the fabric a bit to get it to lay nicely and sewed the opening shut by hand. Then I finally gathered the top of the sleeve. I had some problems fitting it into the armhole because it is so large, but after a few tries and errors, I managed to fit it perfectly. Now, as the hardest part of this sewing project is out of the way, I moved on to the frill that will be on the bottom of the dress. Making it was simple. I just had to join two strips of fabric to get one strip about 2 meters long. Then I finished the edges and gathered the top of the frill. Before I sewed the frill to the dress, I quickly hemmed the skirt. I was bold enough to do it without basting it in place first, but please don't do it the way I did it. I messed up too many skirt hems in my sewing journey, and the only reason for this hem turning okay is just pure luck. To determine the placement of the frill, I matched up the bottom of it to the bottom of the skirt. I was a bit scared as I almost broke my mother's machine when I was sewing the frill on the grey dress, but thankfully my machine didn't have any problems sewing through this much fabric. As most of this dress is already done, it's time to figure out the closure. I sewed a placket to the front of the dress. It's reinforced with fusible interfacing. Also, who knows how I finished the edges of that? I don't even know. Now that I'm taking care of attaching the placket, let me tell you a bit about the book I got the pattern from. Now, I decided to use the term 80s dress in this video because this specific book was printed in the 80s. But the thing is that the copyright for this book is from the 70s. The reason for that is the fact that this manual was reproduced throughout those years, with only slight changes, similarly to many Victorian and Edwardian sewing manuals. I do own different books from this author, and I can tell you that they're not much different from each other. A similar pattern could be probably used in the 70s. And then I realized I made a mistake. So it seems I have done something wrong with those panels, because it all lines up in the waist, but the one side is longer than the other. I must have made this panel just too long. Probably my markings just disappeared, so I sewed it wrong. So I will have to rip this part off, resew the bottom edge of this panel, and resew the frills on this panel, and then this should be aligned, hopefully. So yes, a bit of more work than I expected, but I should be able to fix this relatively easily. So let's move on. After that problem was solved, I moved on to making the buttonholes. I tested different sizes on a scrap of fabric just to make sure what was right for my buttons, and then copied the placement from the original dress. My buttons don't match the dress perfectly, as for some reason buttons in this color are hard to find, but they will do alright. The biggest plus of making this dress before was that the collar was already drafted correctly. On the mock-up I had to redo the collar multiple times, as drafting the curve of the neck and shoulders isn't easy. I did scare myself a bit though, because I might have transferred the pattern to the fabric incorrectly, making it just a touch smaller, but thankfully I managed to fit the collar to the neckline correctly. This dress could be done right now if not for one important practical element: pockets. In this case, those are patch pockets. They have a channel with elastic on the top, similar to the sleeves. Before sewing them to the dress, I basted them in place to make sure they will be mirroring each other, as the specific placement is not marked in any way on the pattern. As I put the dress on, I noticed that it's gapping under the bust, so I sewed on little snaps in that place, and now it lays perfectly. Now the dress is finally finished. I was thinking about where to film the finished result, and I came up with a photo shoot on a carpet hanger, or what we call trzepak in Polish. Why? Because what Polish kid didn't play on a carpet hanger?
Can I get up there? It's kinda high. Nah, I'm gonna get up there. Okay, this is hard. I'm gonna fall. Okay, but is it that high? Should I try again? Yes, I should. Oh no, this is shaking. Huh, I failed.
So you know when the gamer boys tell you that YouTube automatically unsubscribes you, and you probably don't believe them? Well, it's true, so please check if you're subscribed, and if you're not, maybe subscribe, because YouTube is